Hi, everybody. Welcome to College Chats. Today, I'm going to be joined by Mr. Anthony Waldrop. Anthony, super glad that you're here. Anthony, quick little background. He is a financial analyst at LPL Financial. He's a recent graduate, 2022, and he was also a transfer student, which is going to be a key point to talk on later on. And Anthony, I believe you're also doing CFA, right?
Yes. Focus on level 1 right now.
Happy to have you on. But I gave you like maybe 3 little touch points of who you are. Maybe you should give a more kind of briefer 1 to 2 minute background.
Yeah. So, born San Diego, been here all my life, kind of moved around a pretty decent amount around here. But as Beck mentioned, I am a transfer student. So I did transfer in halfway through to SDSU, which was definitely pretty pivot. Is definitely a lot in terms of kind of switching from community into state, which we can touch on a little bit. But yeah, I'm a financial analyst at LPL currently in their FAR rotational program, which we can touch on a little bit later. But definitely excited to be here, being in FIS and then at state and trying to stay involved. So it's always great to give back. So I'm glad that you asked me to come on and be a part of this.
Yeah, dude, it was super fun having you run FIS during your last semester. I mean, what was the choice behind doing that? Most people they treat their last semester, even their last year, as I'm just gonna chill. I have something secured, like I'm gonna take my time, enjoy college, and then move on. What was the thinking behind that?
I think for me, so this kind of ties back to being a transfer student, which again we can kind of get into a little bit later. But coming from transfer student, kind of working as much as I did, as I was always working. I didn't necessarily have a lot of background or like finance experience. So those 2 years of being at state was I got to grind. I got to put something on my resume and get the experience and kind of get in that leadership role so where I can just learn and challenge myself. So coming into that last semester was a lot. It was definitely challenging. Definitely built me up to be in the career that I'm in now. But yeah, no, I needed more and I wanted to learn as much as I could and just be in a tough situation to see how I would perform. And it definitely worked out, but it wasn't necessarily easy. So that's kind of my idea behind it, as you put it.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm sure you met like a lot of interesting people that you still talk to this day. I believe you were very close with like people like Taka, a couple of people in LPL, and other professionals as well that kind of we brought into FIS as a result. But I mean, that's a good point. I mean, do you think that, if you hadn't transferred and you started as a freshman, do you think that you would have kind of been at the FIS stage right from the get?
No. Okay, so I guess a few things, and this kind of goes into my background. When I came out of high school, I did not have necessarily good grades. I think my GPA was probably like a 2.7. I think weighted was like a 3.5, but that's just so it wasn't necessarily like perfect in high school. And I originally wanted to be like a school counselor. Like I really wanted to help youth and get back in that direction. And I was originally going to go to Colorado as I got into a few schools, but it just ended up being too expensive. And so I kind of pivoted and was like, okay, I'll just do community. Ended up going to Mesa College and I decided to do accounting. I just remember being a kid, always going into banks, seeing tellers and being like, oh, this is so cool, like money. And so I thought that's what it was. It's not necessarily exactly the same. So originally I did accounting and that was my basis going into community. And then my last semester at community college, I was already in an accounting job doing accounts receivable and kind of helping out with accounts payable and other stuff. And honestly, I was really bored. I wasn't necessarily enjoying it. And I talked to my accounting professor that I was tutoring for, and he was just like, look, if you want to be more decision making and more on the cash side and actually like seeing the movement rather than just kind of accounting for it, then finance might be the route you want to take. And then that's what kind of got me into finance. And I did the switch. And then going into state, I had no idea what I was doing. And that first semester I was just working and I really didn't know what was going on. And then that second semester is when I heard about FIS from Frank Mazza, which I believe you already had on.
Yes.
Mentioned everyone to come out, and I was like, okay. And I had like $40 in my pocket. Like I had like $40, $25 to sign up, and I was like, I'm gonna do it. Like I gotta do something. And so I just and it was a risk, but it was definitely worth it. And I met so many great people, like you mentioned, Taka, and some of my best friends today, like Aiden and Ben and a few other people. Me and Ben are pretty close. So it's cool to see everyone, and like you get this sense of community and friendship, and I wouldn't be who I am or like where I'm at without like clubs like FIS. So that was a big thing for me. But yeah, the background was interesting. It took a while to figure out what I wanted to do. So
Yeah, and then tell me more about like the community college kind of experience, right? Because I've heard from a bunch of transfers that in community college specifically, it's not the same like vibe as a large scale university, right? I don't think a lot of people would do something that you did, which was even intern some accounting internship, right? So what was the landscape like?
yeah, and kind of to actually answer your previous question, I don't think I actually did, but if I would have started at skate, I think I would have had a different major. And so I don't think I would have maybe been able to make that pivot and learn what I wanted to do, nor would I probably would have just done something different. And being at state immediately, like you definitely have more access to, I think Mesa had a couple business clubs. My friend Aiden went there as well, and I think he was a little bit more involved at the time, but you don't hear about it as much.
Mhm.
Very different culture in the sense that, and Mesa's a great school, great community college, but at the same time, like there's not as much access. So there's definitely like a big disconnect that, you might not hear about internships, you might not hear about these clubs, and not everyone's on the same route. A lot of people are still kind of working, and community also is like very different in the sense that not everyone there's to get their bachelor. So it's kind of like a different focus, I would say, in terms of culture and who you're around. But it definitely still built me up. I had amazing teachers and people who definitely like cared about me and were pushing me. So I wouldn't like change it, but I do think like if I had started at state, I would have had a different path and maybe started a lot of things that I wish I started sooner, like trying to get an internship and knowing that I could probably do that and probably get paid for it, because at the time I think I never really understood what it was. So there's definitely a lot of things that I think a state college versus maybe starting at community, there can definitely be some disadvantages, but it's not necessarily impossible or maybe a disadvantage as a whole.
Mhm.
Well, I enjoyed my community college, and I enjoyed my state life as well. And you started at state the whole time, so I think
Mhm.
everyone has their own path, and it's all about determination. So
Yeah. I mean, you touched on it right at the end, but what do you think about the idea of, you know, does a person need to be under pressure either through the background or either through their current situation for them to like kind of break out of their shell and kind of do these new things that they wouldn't expect that they would be doing, but all of a sudden they are. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, I think it depends, because I think maybe not the audience who ends up watching this will know who Dylan is, but Dylan Fitzpatrick, I mean, I think me and him come from a little bit different worlds, but we were like the same in sense of like fighting for what we wanted and putting in the time. And I think it really depends on the person and the situation, whether that's environmental, yeah, financial, or whatever else, right? Like in terms of just being young or whatever happens. But I think for me, it was I really wanted out of my situation, and I wanted to be able to afford what I wanted to do in life and just not necessarily struggle. And so I think for me, that was my motive and why I did what I did. I think having pressure is, but also having freedom to explore, I think is also important. So it's kind of
Hmm.
like two sides of that, right? Like for me,
Yeah.
pressure and like, hey, I have to do this, like I need to do this, or else this is just the job I had at that time, was that's it, that's all I'm gonna do. So I think
Hmm.
I had like a different side of it, whereas maybe some other people, it's I'm highly interested in this and this is what I want to do, or I want to create value here. Some people really see the importance of things. I think Dylan's a
Hmm.
good example of that. Like he loves technology and he sees the benefit, and that's something he wants to do. So I think it's just really depends. Like I think having pressure or having interest is a big factor in how well someone's going to do. I do think pressure is important, and not everyone has that.
Hmm.
But it's all variation, right? So, I'm not sure if
Yeah.
I can
No,
talk
that's
much.
great. It's sort of this like whole pressure combo reminds me of like this caveman ideology of like, back in the day before civilization existed, these cavemen would literally be in fear of like getting, I don't know, hunted down by animals. So they would always have like this adrenaline and this like I don't know, their successes and how they created fire or whatever, hunted and learned all these things came from just them trying to survive. So it's an interesting little concept.
Yeah, I think stress, right? I think it's
Yeah.
stress, right? Like there's a good amount of stress that motivates people.
Mhm.
I think some are fortunate enough to have a good balance of it, and depends on how you manage it. So
Mhm. You did touch on sort of the interests aspect a little bit. I know you are a big skateboarder. You used to, I looked at your old Instagram videos. You used to create clips of skateboarding. What was that like? When did you get into that? Do you still do that?
so no, I don't. I skate sometimes with my friend Corky, but there's a little bit of risk in that. I think at the time, I got hurt. I had surgery on my ankle from it, and a lot of the jobs I was doing were physical. You had to walk around and be able to move. So I think the fear of getting hurt and not being able to do my job and get that source of income was a little bit more pressure to just like let it go. But I still dabble a little bit. I'll still go skate and have some fun and do it, get out there. But more my focus now is like more just health and like going to the gym. I really enjoy that. Definitely a good way to break away from screens and just get outside a little bit. So, but I
Mhm.
do sometimes, but not as much. I don't like getting hurt, so try to avoid it. But I do still
Yeah.
play with it. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I don't know if this is even similar, but I used to do a lot of like martial arts back in the day and I kind of dropped that, but mine is a little bit different in the sense that one, I had like a black eye from someone kicking my face one time, but then the other aspect is it like I just didn't have time to commute back and forth to the place, and then it's like
yeah,
2 hours wasted just to, you know,
time and it's investment. You gotta spend money. So
yeah, it's a
you
little
gotta think
tough.
what you're trying to do. So it just depends. But
Yeah, let's see. What was I trying to say? I had a train of thought and it's just gone. Oh, okay. You touched on the gym part. What is it like now? What's like your little balance that you like to go by so that you can balance health, you can balance work, you could balance your personal? I know you recently traveled to like Vegas and stuff, but like what's that balance look like?
yeah, so I guess I'll talk on this in 2 points. First, I'll connect it to academics, and then I'll kind of
Hmm.
shift back to being out of school. During school was really difficult because I was working 40 to 60 hours, and I was also full-time school. I was running the club,
Yep.
more than VP of operations and president. And then we were also doing like CFA research challenge, various things. So my time management wasn't perfect. It was hard. And I think a lot of it comes down to what you think is important. But I will say, like, if you're a student, creating calendars, I think helps a lot of people. Some people are just really good at keeping it in their head. I never really made calendars. I just kind of understood like what I had to do and just kind of tried to do it where I could. It wasn't perfect. And I think making calendars probably would have been better. I still don't do that. So that's a problem. But
What?
I think a lot of it is just, finding the balance between spending time with loved ones and family and friends to still get that joy and excitement and breathe a little bit and not be so focused on what you're doing. I think a lot of people have this idea that you need to know like A through Z to land the job and get out and be successful. And I think a lot of it is just understanding how to get to A to Z. And if you can understand that process, then it's just a system that you need to complete. So take the time to just relax and see the overview rather than just being so caught up in getting to each. I think that will help a lot of people. And I definitely wish I would have taken my time and just relaxed a little bit and spent more time with friends and family, and the personal relationships that I had definitely made a lot of errors there and just putting too much focus in some areas. But now being out of school and just working, I have a very easier time because I'm just kind of working the 40 to 50ish hours, and that's not even. I mainly just work the 40, so it's different for me because I was working so
Mhm.
much. Going from like 17 to 20-hour days to just kind of having your normal standard day and being able to relax is different. So my work-life balance is really good right now, and I enjoy it a lot. I can spend time with family. I can go on trips. Like you mentioned, I just came back from Vegas, going to Arizona next week to see family, and just being able to be a part of everything now is really nice because I spent a long time just never being able to go, whether it was birthdays and stuff. The
Mhm.
timing I just never had. So it's good now. And I appreciate where I'm at. But time management now is a lot easier. And I wish I would have just relaxed a little bit more in college and maybe not stressed as much because it's definitely, you got to remember everything you're doing now and the things you miss out do have an effect. And you definitely got to take that time and be careful with what you're doing. So.
And I know you've actually gone a couple times because I kept the track of like the group chat we're in. You've gone, what is it, snowboarding and skiing a couple times? What is that
Yeah.
like? Are you pretty good by now?
Yeah, so I'm a skater, so snowboarding's not too hard for me. I'm not like crazy, I don't do jumps and stuff yet, but
Yeah.
definitely fun, man. I've went I think 3 times now, and my buddy's trying to get me to go next week, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to do it. But it's fun. I love it. I think those are the things that when you do get out of school, or if you have the chance in general, like take them and take those times, because those are the memories and the things you're gonna look back on, and the things that allow you to breathe. And then you can
Mhm.
focus more, you want to be able to stay positive in what you're doing. It shouldn't hinder your life, so.
I mean, you did touch on the school aspect of like how you were essentially working longer hours during your college years than now. And I want to kind of understand what was the reasoning behind that, right? For me, I feel like with the way classes and even mostly college is structured in society, it's like you have to complete these insane amount of units with the limited amount of time you have and be expected to balance that with social, professional, family, whatever it may be. And so they give you and throw at you these GE units, these the major units, and it's like 115 for us, I believe, 120 or something like that. And it's just these diversified classes that you each have to spend 10 to 20 hours on each 3 units. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it was hard. I'm not gonna lie, but I think I'm very fortunate in the sense that I did really well in school, even with the lack of studying that I did. I did perform pretty well for the most part, even with my schedule. I definitely failed a couple tests because I just couldn't get out of work, couldn't really study for, but I did do really well. Like my GPA was solid, and most of my classes were higher up on the board. So I was very fortunate in that regard. But I will say on my end, it was just like every 15-minute break, every lunch break, like at night, anytime I had a free minute, was studying as much as I could, audio stuff when I'm working or whatever it was, just put in all that time as much as I could. The curriculums are hard because not all of it applies, but most of it does, and depending on what you do. And so some of it might seem pointless, but I would say like don't disregard what they're doing. A lot of it does apply, and even the ones you didn't think would help end up helping. At least in
Mhm.
my experience, everything's been beneficial. And I think a lot of people don't realize when they give you those general eds, you can manage that and use it to your advantage, right? Like take classes that are going to be beneficial for you, even if it's not your job, but just your personal life. And
Mhm.
knowledge. Like try to structure those classes as beneficial as much as you can. That's what I did. Any gen
Mhm.
ed I had, I just chose the ones I thought were going to be most beneficial for me, even if it was a chem class, which I'll never need to do chem. Like it was just one of those things where like you need to like be able to sit down and like think about the long term. Like I took a psych class because I thought it'd be beneficial to learn about how to communicate and things like that. My comms class was very beneficial. It taught me how to present and write. So
Mhm.
I think if you look at it in that sense, it gets a lot easier to want to take the class rather than being like, oh, I'll never need this, let me just toss it. There's always a learning point in whatever you do. So find it. And even if it's one thing, even if it's one chapter out of a 10 chapter thing you have to read, at least you got something out of it. It's all about that thought of just being positive and taking, the good with the bad. You're going to do things you don't want to do, but at least try to gain
Mhm.
something from it. That's how I did college as much as I could. So
Mhm. Do you think that there would be any way that college could be restructured to a way where people and students, because I've never heard students ever say, yo, so I had this class yesterday, dude, it was like the most interesting thing I've ever heard. We talked about this. Have you ever heard a student say that?
I mean, I do, but I'm a nerd, so
But
I
yeah, you say that, but I feel like the majority of students that I've kind of heard about, they're like, oh, we have this test coming up. Have you studied for
yeah,
that? Like,
I think a lot of that, I mean, obviously, it always comes down to the person. And I wouldn't say the curriculum's perfect, and
mhm,
not every teacher's perfect. And getting the teacher you want might not happen, and that's just an issue with, the college and who's available to teach and things like that and who's tenured. But, not touching too much on that. But I
mhm,
think it just depends, right? Like, not all of us want to do tests, and it might seem pointless and it might seem a little dumb, or maybe we just don't want to do it. We don't have the time. We want to relax sometimes, or we want to focus on this class rather than the other one. But like I said, like it's all about taking it with a grain of salt and trying to find some benefit and trying to find an interest and, in what you can do. I think one of my favorite classes was a tax accounting class, just because it was so interesting. And it's something that everyone should know. Like, everyone should understand taxes as much as people don't want to. And same with like accounting. I think a lot of finance people don't realize how important accounting is.
Yeah.
And, I think it just all comes down to how you perceive it and how you go into it, right? Like, it's kind of like that law of attraction, right? Like, if you go into a bad attitude, you're probably not going to enjoy it. But it is hard because I think curriculum versus what you actually need to succeed can differ in various ways, and especially finance, right? Like, before, I think 2022 or 21, like, we didn't even have an Excel class. It's like part of the requirement. And so like you had to learn all that by yourself. And it's one of those things where like you're paying for tuition, so you should get the tools you need to succeed. So having all these classes working and then still having to go do more because you're not learning it can be difficult. So, I mean, I don't know what the solution there. It seems like some schools are trying, like State was trying to put the Excel class into place, which is very good because it's definitely needed in any finance job for the most part. So I think curriculums are getting better. I think it's just going to take time and more student input, right? Like, we have the associated students at State. So I think it's putting good people into place and every student actually having a voice and showing up. It's the only way things will change is if we want it to. So be more active. That's my suggestion. Be more active and voice your opinion, and change can happen. It definitely can. So.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned AS. I had, for the last sort of episode on this podcast, I had Tarek Morrissey, who's a junior. He's running for president of, You remember him? Do you know him?
Yeah, I know. He's cool.
Yeah, he's a great communicator, super involved. His whole mission is basically to do what you said, which is like kind of spread the student voice and get, the school listening to what everybody wants. But that's a great point. And now kind of moving on to like what you do now. What is it like right now? Like, what is the role of the financial rotational analyst at LPL? And what do you kind of do on a day-to-day, right? The infamous day-to-day question.
Yeah, so I'll kind of give a real basic overview of LPL for a sec. So, LPL, Linsco and Private Ledger, founded like 1989. Great company. So we're an independent broker-dealer. Our clients are the advisors, and our mission is to make their job easier so they can help their clients, right? That's kind of the sales pitch for a sec. But essentially, we offer various things for advisors. Like, we want to make their lives easier. So, we offer like brokerage and advisory services, access to solutions like investment solutions. We have technology, platforms, cybersecurity, helping out with operations, admin stuff, day-to-day activities, solutions consulting, different things like that. The whole point is to build their business, right? It's their business, and we're trying to expand it, make it easier for them so that they can truly do what they're trying to do, which is help people in their finance and the things that they need, their investment needs, and everything they're trying to do. And so that's kind of the goal of LPL. I'm not in the client-facing roles as of this time, so I'm not necessarily involved in all those types of activities. In terms of financial analyst rotational program, which we call FAR, it depends. It's not a one-for-one. It really depends on the roles you get. It's going to be different for every single FAR that comes in. We don't have this experience, but we can. It just kind of depends. My first rotation was capital markets, which is really like cash management. A quick overview, it's kind of two sides. So one being our corporate cash and the other being our leverage ratio and just leverage as a whole. On the cash side, we forecast cash and we provide that information to upper management every month and every quarter, and so they can make decisions on how to use it, where it should go, things like dividends or repurchases or other investments, whatever that may be. So anything that affected cash, we try to account for. We work with those teams and then we apply it to our forecast and try to get as close to what it's going to be, make those adjustments as they come around, if we're off or if we're over, whatever that may look like, and just try to get that as solid as we can. The other side is leverage, so debt, right? Anything that affects debt, opening new facilities, maybe, not taking on as much or doing more, whatever that may look like. And then, like I mentioned, dividends and repurchases. So that's kind of like the overview of the job. And then to tie back to curriculum, everything I did at State absolutely applied to this job. It's a very high level.
There you go.
You definitely had to understand corporate finance and everything, which was great. It was great to use all that knowledge and just have a good understanding of it. But my job specifically was, I own different various parts of the broader forecast in terms of taxes and bond economics and various other things. But a lot of it was ad hoc. So CFO or other upper management kind of comes down with a question, and then we do an analysis on it, kind of create a deck, provide them that info, and then they can make decisions off of it. So that was kind of my role, which I just kind of left. Now I'm in FP&A, divisional FP&A, so it's a little subgroup of the firm. I'm still kind of getting ramped up. So don't necessarily own various projects yet, and the team's kind of shifting anyways. It's your standard FP&A role, which is financial planning and analysis for those who don't know. It's a lot of accounting, reporting, and then forecasting, and then explaining variances between actuals and what was forecasted, and being able to talk to that when upper management needs that info or when our business partners need that info as well. So that's kind of the broad overview of what I'm doing right now. But still kind of getting ramped up. Only been about a week, so can't talk too much on the new one, but the old one was a lot of fun. Definitely enjoyed it.
And now what's like the sort of skill set that you use on a consistent basis that you sort of acquired, whether it be through school, FIS and other involvements, maybe projects, you did the CFA. What are some like transferable skills, soft and technical, that are kind of helping you out right now?
Yeah, I would say soft skills particularly is communication. You need to be a really good communicator. And I don't just mean that in talking. I mean that in emailing. I mean that in the analysis that you do, in the decks that you make. You need to be able to explain what you're doing and the why, the how, and what for, and all those kind of things. That just comes with, but communication's big. So if I had to do 2 soft skills that everyone should know, I would say communication on an extremely broad scale, talking in person, online, etiquette, emailing, messaging someone, text messaging someone, all of that. And then the second part is just being able to adapt. Things happen all the time. It could be fire drills. There can be an analysis you get that you have no idea, how to start. And a lot of that just comes with being able to handle change and trying and just doing the best you can, and then asking questions when you don't know. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to communicate. So just be adaptable and really know how to talk and do what you do, and just know your limits for sure. For technical skills, I think it's all job dependent. Like even as a FAR analyst, you could be in an accounting role, you could be in a client-facing role, you can be in a very specific finance role. So it's gonna vary. You may not necessarily have the perfect skill going into it. So definitely know Excel. I think there's so many ways you can do that. My biggest advice on Excel is to make it useful for yourself. You can watch videos, you can go on sites like, I'm trying to forget that site that I know FIS that we established, but like Wall Street Prep, things like that, or YouTube. But I think it's more important to make it useful for yourself, right? Like sit with Excel, a blank Excel, and what could you use it for? Could you do a budget? Could you build a saving plan? Can you build a template for your, like whatever it may be, find a use for it, learn the functions, and the more you can apply it to yourself, the more you can start applying it to what other people need. But if someone just asks you to build something, you might not know what to do if you've never even tried it. Practice, YouTube, educational sites, but I think knowing how to make something useful for yourself makes you actually want to use it. PowerPoint is pretty big as well, any Microsoft ability. And then I think also, which you won't really know until you start a job, but if there's a specific company you want to work for, I would try to figure out what databases they use or what other systems they use. I know a lot of companies use like Oracle and things like that. Like if you can learn how to use those things before you go in, you have a huge advantage. So I think just knowing technology as a whole and systems and stuff is beneficial for technical skills. And then aside from that, obviously know the job you're applying for. If you're applying for FP&A, you want to know what comes with that, what you should know. If you're applying for something like fixed income, like you should know that environment and the market and other things. So I think it just depends on the job you're applying for or the role that you're in. For me specifically, it's understand the industry, the market, know Excel, Microsoft stuff, and just, be able to use the knowledge you have for the things you need to do. I think it just kind of comes with practice, and you realize that once you get on the job. Those are kind of my advice, like just trying to know your audience. And that goes very broad in terms of, what you're doing.
Yeah, you touched on some great points there. How do you think that, do you have any advice in terms of the people aspect of it? Because I know a lot of people, they're great in terms of like getting to work, learning stuff, putting their heads down. But at some point, there has to be that connection made between a person that's working and the person that you're trying to reach out to is a person working at that company you're interested in. How is like the people aspect coming into play?
Yeah, I think what you're asking is like the network.
Yeah.
Right? And how do you apply that? Networking's big. It's one of my biggest regrets starting college because I wish I did it sooner, but it definitely worked out in the end. But I think it's just like kind of anything, right? Like when you first start a class, you learn the people in the class, you make friends, you work together, you teamwork, whatever that may look like. It's kind of the same thing with a company. You get on a team, you learn the team, your audience, you start seeing how they like things, the formatting they want to see, the type of language they want to use, things like that. It definitely comes with time, but the faster you can realize how people want things done, I think the quicker you'll learn and the quicker you'll be able to show out and provide more value. That kind of goes back to my last comment, which was know your audience, right? And that's with everything. Whether you're interviewing, you want to know your interviewer. If you're networking, you want to know what they do. You want to know who you're talking to, so you can use language specific to them that makes sense, right? So I think that's where it comes to with people, is knowing people. Like, know who you're talking to and know how you should be talking and how you can communicate with them for them to want to connect with you. Your personality is big, and people will see that. But I will touch on this before I go off, but I think it's also like, if you can get face to face with people, it's a lot more beneficial than online. There's only so much you can tell about someone online. Like, anyone watching this who doesn't know me may not really get a full picture of who I am until you meet me in person and you see my body language and you see how I talk and stuff like that. So I think if you're trying to network or you're trying to get to know people, try to be in person, try to get those face-to-faces, go to events, join a club, right? Like, that's how you learn, is in that environment. So, and it can be hard with the way the world is today. A lot of interviews are online and a lot of jobs are remote. So try to get that practice in before you kind of get to the job, because it can be difficult.
And I know you touched on this great point like right now, but I know you're great with helping students. Do you mind if I put like your LinkedIn description, or like not your description, the link to your LinkedIn, so people can try to reach out if they have questions about you, about LPL, about sort of what you do, anything life, anything SDSU, anything finance?
Of course. Yeah, I'm always available. Don't mind a phone call. You can message me on LinkedIn, whatever. And if you want to get a phone call or whatever, we can definitely do that. Always open, always available as much as I can. I would just say one thing. When you're reaching out to people, like I said, like, know your audience, but also know what you want and what you're trying to gain from. It makes it a lot easier for someone to help you if you know what you actually need help with. It makes it quicker. And then if you do reach out, like, I would say people can be busy, so definitely keep reaching out and be active about it. You want to be able to, if you're trying to gain something from someone, like, understand, like, they may not necessarily gain a lot from you. So be active in that and be active in talking to people and reaching back out. And, it's kind of your responsibility to get what you need. And people will help if you're interested. People always want to help because everyone was in the same boat. So definitely reach out, though. I'm always available.
All right. Those are the last parting words of Anthony Waldrop. Thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. I always enjoy having conversations with you. And hopefully, as you progress through the FAR, and we get maybe see you back on and see you, on an updated journey.
Yeah, definitely. I'll always be on SDSU campus where I can. So
All right. There you go. Thanks, Anthony.
All right.